Hey everyone, it's Adam from the Outdoor Adventure Center. Today we've got a video on reading rivers from a run on the St. George River that was recently done in Searsmont, Maine. First, it's important to go over a few of the safety considerations we're going to take today. And I can't help but mention first, it's really important that you have a partner you trust. So here's my partner today. We're running our tandem canoe with center flotation and bow flotation to displace as much water as possible. This time of the year, the water is extremely cold, even though the days are starting to get longer and warmer. It's important not to be tricked by that warm air. The point is to have fun on the river, but risk management starts long before you even get on the water. It's important to note that I'm a Maine guide, an ACA Level 3 river instructor, a wilderness first responder, an EMT, and I have over 15 years of experience teaching in the outdoors. I've also been extremely fortunate to be running whitewater rivers in Maine for about the last 10 years. I'm not giving this resume to brag or to puff up my ego, rather just to give you some perspective on some of the risks involved in this kind of an outing and the fact that you need to be prepared for this. Before you head out, you should look for current flow rate of whatever body of water you're going to go on. This will indicate trends. Also look at the forecast. Make sure that if you've had heavy rains or consistent snowmelt over the weeks before, that you can gauge the height versus what's normal so you know what you're getting yourself into. This body of water, the St. George River, actually does not have a gauge, but we use other reliable river sources nearby to get an estimate of what it might be running at. In this case, a week prior to our run, the water was 6 feet higher than normal. This is going to make a lot of the river's dynamics change, obviously. The way that rocks are covered or branches may have come down, you can reasonably expect that the river at flood stage will look nothing like what you've seen it at normal levels. One of the most important pieces of equipment that you'll need to bring with you is a personal flotation device, or a PFD. This is required in the state of Maine to have at least one of these PFDs per person in any human-powered craft. It's always a good idea to have something to bail water out of your boat with, and this can be as simple as finding a milk jug or some sort of a 1 gallon capacity jug that you can cut, string to your boat, and use to scoop water out. Make sure you have a good painter line on the bow and the stern of the boat. This would help you potentially line the boat around dangerous areas or rapids, or come in handy if you should get your boat caught on a strainer or broached on a rock. An additional paddle is always a good idea in the event that you lose one in a rapid. It's also a great idea to carry dry bags on board and have the ability to have dry clothing after you get off your run. Each boat should also carry a throw bag. These ropes are made of nylon and covered with polypropylene so that they'll float on the surface of the water. They can be essential life-saving devices in case someone goes for a swim. We'll talk more about how to swim if you do fall into a rapid later on. You should also be carrying the knowledge of how to use and the equipment necessary for a pin kit. This series of static ropes, carabiners, and pulleys will allow you to create a 3-to-1 pulley system to unfetch your canoe should you get it stuck on anything in the water. We've made a decision to not wear helmets based on water levels and familiarity with this river. If I had never done this river and water was higher, I would certainly wear a helmet. Today we're also carrying communication devices in case there's an emergency and we need to communicate with someone else on the outside to render help to our party. This portion of the river is actually quite flat and uneventful, but it's a great opportunity to get comfortable with your paddling partner. Since it's spring, you might not have done a lot of paddling yet, and this is a good time to get warmed up. Rivers like the St. George change in size and flow rate throughout the year. Currents on the river are determined by volume and gradient of the water. Essentially, this means that if there's been a lot of water in a river that's relatively deep or narrow, you're going to have fast currents. As we get later into the season and the snow melt sort of starts to cease and rain stops happening as frequently, we'll notice that our currents will slow on our rivers. So we've zoomed in here on a larger river making an S-turn. The same concepts apply with every body of water. On the inside of this turn, you can see a lot of sand and deposit. So what's happening here is water is being flushed across the channel and depositing on the inside of the turn. The outside of the turn, across from that beach, would usually be scoured or steep. These deposits are a process of water crashing forcefully into the outside of a turn and then carrying the sediment towards the inside. It's important to know that the water will be faster and deeper on the outside of any of these turns. It'll be shallower and slower on the inside. So now that we know how water moves through a turn, we're going to also start to look for things in the river that might be a hazard or might give us an idea of where we want to go in our boat. So one thing we want to talk about that are extremely dangerous are strainers. You can think of making pasta at home. What the strainer does is essentially allow water to move through something, but it catches the pasta. So in this situation, a strainer like a down log would allow water to move under it, but would not allow you and your boat to get past it, and it might pin you against it. This is obviously extremely dangerous because the pressure of moving water behind you can force you underwater where you can't breathe. You can see in the video here we have a strainer that's in the center of the river, so we're going to make our move to river left to avoid it. Good job, human. If you are in a situation where you fall out of your boat and hit a strainer, if you can't avoid it, you need to swim up on top of the strainer to try to get your chest as high out of the water as possible. If you should find yourself having fallen out of your boat, you need to get in the defensive swimming position, which is to float on your butt with your nose and toes up and out of the water. When it's safe, you'll aggressively roll over and swim towards an eddy. Under no circumstances should you ever stand up in a rapid. This could lead to a foot entrapment, and it's extremely dangerous. As we move through this rapid, you can start to see we've got waves forming, water is moving over the surface of rocks and creating what are known as hydraulics or recirculating water. This is a lot of fun as long as you can avoid the big rocks sticking out. If you look in the center of the channel here, you can see what, if you use your imagination, sort of looks like a downstream V. And what we mean by that is the widest part, the opening of the V, is facing you. The construction is far away. This is an ideal place to point your boat, right in the center of. Let's hit this eddy! Never mind, we'll go left. Good, forward paddle, forward paddle. We're going to continue to ride this rapid down, sticking right over the top of that hydraulic, down this flowage. There's a big eddy on the right that we decide not to peel out into, and now we're running underneath the bridge. This is a really interesting section of this river. It's really fun and bouncy. There's lots of waves. We're going to ride right over the center of it, and eventually we're going to eddy out on river right. So now I'm fast forwarding a bit here. We were running in a group of 3, so there were 3 boats in the water. One of the boats ended up eddying out on river right before this big rapid. So I'm just taking the time to run back and check in, make sure everything's okay. And I find our boat partners here, they're bailing out their boat, kind of picking their line. We're having a quick discussion about the best way to run through this rapid. And then they're off. They're off to float down the river like the rest of us did. And there they go, they're off, following the same line that the rest of the boats did, having a lot of fun. That looks like a great time. So through the magic of video editing, we've made our way down the river quite a ways. And the nature of the river has changed quite a bit. It's much wider now, not quite as sinuous, and not quite as fast of water moving. So the current here is pretty slow. We're going to keep going until we hit Magog Falls, which is the last rapid on this stretch of the river. Remember, boating in the spring can be extremely dangerous, so it's up to you to make informed choices and manage risk appropriately for your skill set. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and that you get some time on the water this spring and into the summer. All right, human, ready?